You were all that matters. I put you in front of my melody. You are all that matters. You are all that matters. Oh, way, oh, way. You are all that matters. Oh, way, oh, way. You are all that matters. Happy Sunday to all our Christian faithfuls. I sang that song because I know that many people in Nigeria and around the world who go to church love this music. It is a spiritual song, yes. And welcome to Africa Rise with Susan West. It is, of course, another beautiful Sunday here in London, and I do hope that wherever you are joining us from, that you're having a wonderful Sunday, because I have started out in high spirit, and I do hope that I'm able to transfer that spirit to you. Anyway, we will feed off each other as we go on. Thank you for joining us. As you join this broadcast, do the needful, which is create watch parties, invite your friends, share this broadcast, and let's keep this conversation rolling. Do the needful, send in your questions and comments as we go on. Of course, don't be shy about it. Just send in the questions and comments as you have them. Yes. Welcome, Adele Fataye Ayodele. Welcome. Happy Sunday to you too. Yes, so if you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed to our channels, please do so. It is Africa Rise TV on YouTube, Africa_Rise.tv on Instagram, and Swab21 on Facebook. So it is SWOB21. There are loads of people who watch from my personal wall. If you want to migrate to my page, it will be absolutely fantastic. So today our topic of discussion is about the facts, fiction of the divinity, fiction of the divinity, kingship, and reign of Emperor Haile Selassie. Why did I decide to have this conversation? Because, of course, you understand that what this platform is designed to do is to inform and educate us and help us disabuse our minds and all the misinformations that we've had and we've grown up with, especially as continental Africans. And so I did run into a few young people having a debate on a platform where I belong, and it was about Emperor Haile Selassie. And I thought that, throwing more light on this particular issue will help us disabuse our minds a little more. I'm just going to take a short read on the biography of Emperor Haile Selassie. Emperor Haile Selassie was crowned emperor in 1930, but exiled during World War II after leading the resistance to the Italian invasion. He was reinstated in 1941 and sought to modernize the country over the next few decades through social, economic, and educational reforms. He ruled until 1974, when famine, unemployment, and political opposition forced him out of office. Grace Akon Andrew Bia, welcome. Happy Sunday to you. So really quickly, we have a few guests that should be on. One of them is having real issues connecting. The other is, of course, in Ethiopia, and the time zone difference is going to be a bit of a challenge, as he's going to be breaking his fast and then joining us. But right about now, I have got Ras Jomo waiting in the wings, and we will kick off today's conversation in earnest. Hello, brother Ras Jomo.
Greetings to you and to the audience. Thank you for inviting me once again.
Right. So really quickly, it's unfortunate that the first person I wanted to bring on was the person who was creating the heat on the group, as far as the, talking about certain issues or whatever he knows, as far as history goes, that he's read about Emperor Haile Selassie. One of the things I just want you to do first is to just give us a little bit of a background of Emperor Haile Selassie, just a little background on him.
Okay. And thank you, as I said again, to all of those who are listening. I want to present information that I know, information that I've found. And as we talk, maybe we'll even get into some of the things that I've heard And depending upon the depth of information and knowledge, I can possibly go a little bit deeper for those who might entertain such questions. I'm just giving you what I've learned, in my incarnation, and adding up facts. It's awesome. It's amazing. It's divine. Um, I would just like to give maybe a little backdrop, and hopefully, if questions come up, we can catch everyone up maybe, because it's very difficult to talk about His Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie the First without knowing the background history of Ethiopia, knowing the history of the bloodlines of different families, and knowing the historical and even the spiritual or religious perspective. All of those things, I believe, help paint a more clear picture of what we see, how we comment, and whose perspective do we repeat the narrative. You see, and in saying that, I'm communicating humbly because all of us communicate based off of what we have been allowed to see or inspired to see. So you mentioned two things, and I want to add something, and we're going reverse. On November 2nd, and actually I don't know if you already told your audience to get some pen and paper, because I would like for them to go a little further if their mind and their conscience pricks them. November 2nd, maybe somebody can write this down. November 2nd, 1930, I would ask that everyone try to find the newspaper in whatever country, city, town, or nation you might be in, because the Associated Press, these people, the nations, the Gentiles, they wrote everything down. So on November 2nd, 1930, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, the person known as Teferi Makanen, his title was Ras Teferi Makanen, was crowned using his baptismal name, Emperor Haile Selassie the First, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah, elect of God, and light of the world. And this was not done with his own request of what his titles would become. This was done by the ancient Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which pretty much predates the Roman Catholic Church and the order and the communications that most of us have our modern churches based in. This is the first time that an emperor had actually received the title Light of the World. That's a historic title in Ethiopian history. So there are a lot of things. I know that you reached out to the Christian audience, and I like to say I hope that everyone is still in their resurrected state of mind. And Ramadan Mubarak to all of the Islamic family who may be watching. And I hope to all of those who celebrated Passover that you're still thinking about liberty and freedom and about true liberation under the Creator. So all of our religious families, all of our spiritual families, welcome to Talk in this African Circle. So that's my greeting. So understanding all of those historical contexts and even those titles, that title King of Kings is a title that's traditional in Ethiopian history. He is not the only king with those titles. So that's the first thing that needs to be mentioned. You mentioned something also about during the Italian-Ethiopian War, which I have to tell everyone is the beginning of World War II. The covenant that the League of Nations had established stated that no sovereign empire would violate the integrity or the sovereignty of another sovereign empire who is a part of the League of Nations, which is now known as the United Nations. That organization is defunct because of that war. Ethiopia, being the only independent African nation outside of Liberia at the time, was invited even into the League of Nations by Italy. So it was like they were inviting them in, and they were also planning to avenge another war that they lost in 1896, known as the Battle of Adwa, ADWA. All right, that's in March of 1896. You have to know history because you have to see how things played together. In 1936, His Majesty did leave Ethiopia, but he left as a sovereign emperor to preserve the sovereignty of the nation. If anything happened in a modern battle, unlike what happened in other countries, he didn't go to a bunker. He wasn't hid in a secluded place. He was on the battlefield with his army. He wasn't somewhere, behind the scene calling shots. So I think we have to also understand the historical context in that area. So as the emperor also did not really initially want to leave to go to England into exile. He wanted to remain there, but he was advised that he should leave Ethiopia just in case there was any physical demise of the emperor. The sovereignty of the crown would not be taken over by another nation. So even if the physical landmass of Ethiopia was in turmoil or maybe overrun by the Italians, as long as there was a sovereign king, there's always hope that the nation itself has the ability to survive. So those are some of the background things that I think we need to historically and culturally understand. And you can find that information in particular. Many people don't realize, but there's a part 1 and a part 2. This is a hardcover of volume 2 of Emperor Haile Selassie's autobiography, My Life in Ethiopia's Progress. So it's one thing to speculate about people, and it's nice to really hear what they say and compare it with history.
Right. It's good that you mentioned that you went ahead of one of my questions I wanted to ask you.
Sorry.
My question is the reason I decided I was going to do this broadcast today. In the group, there was an argument where some people were giving accolades and adoration to the Emperor Haile Selassie, and some other group came to attack his person to say that he was a coward who ran away and left his people in time of war. So I needed clarification on that before we go on to talking about.
Yeah, and honestly, to be honest, I understand where many of those sentiments come from. Being a person who loved many of our Pan-African leaders and historians, some of those same communications were held by the same personages who had actually admired and looked to the emperor. Those are, honestly speaking, those are one of the realities that happened with some of the Garveyites. Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. It was looked upon a little differently from the West. People thought that His Majesty was running away and leaving his people. But I'm going to try to show it. I hope that the camera can catch it. But I want you to see that that's a picture of His Majesty, not in a bunker, but he's actually in the mountains with his gun shooting airplanes.
Yes.
So His Majesty is also seen praying and moving in the mountains on the battlefield. So he did not leave his people behind. He also went to the League of Nations and he gave that speech where the Italians were heckling him. You can look at that on YouTube now. And he says that it's us today. It will be you tomorrow. You will light the match in Africa and a fire will burn Europe. And about a year to the day, that's when Hitler began to wage war on the Europeans. So I think that we need to look at the complete history. And also let us remember that many people in the West, just like right now, what's happening on the ground might not get reported accurately from unworthy news sources. So you have to realize that there's an organization that was set up when Ethiopia was in war. The story probably goes on all over the world. I'll speak about what I know in America. There's a book out called The African American Reactions to War in Ethiopia. Black people in America, when the war broke out, because many Black people in America were already following the consciousness and history of Ethiopia and Africa. When the war broke out against the ancient biblical African nation, Black people in America wanted to sign up and go and help the emperor. They began to help. I don't want to spoil the book. They began to want to leave so much that the U.S. government began to dissuade people from giving Black people passports. That's what happened here in America. In New York City, lines were around the block for people who were willing to go and help the emperor. Now, me as a Rasta, I read the Bible too. It kind of reminds me of Psalms 110, but you can read that later. We don't have to get into Bible study. I know people have been in church all day, so you can do that at your own time. But Psalms 110, that's what that reminds me of. So what ended up taking place is His Majesty organized with his cousin, Malaku Bayan, to create an organization called the Ethiopian World Federation. And it became a benevolent association that was established all around the world so that Africans who wanted to help Ethiopia and could not go and fight, they were able to have an organization that could raise money, help refugees, and do philanthropic things. And many of those organizations, they became pretty much like the child of the organization that Marcus Garvey had created called the UNIA. So everywhere you see a UNIA, the next thing you see is an Ethiopian World Federation. That organization was established, that the land grant, the Shashamani land grant, where they say that many Rastas come to see, and that's land that His Majesty left. It was actually left to the Ethiopian World Federation as the emperor, giving thanks to all of the Black people around the world who assisted. And he said, here's a land grant. I would like to invite you all to come and help rebuild Africa.
Right. So the American government made it impossible for Black people in America, African Americans, to go and help out Ethiopia to fight a war against. The war was against Italy, was it?
Well, yeah, Italy was fighting against Ethiopia. Ethiopia was at home minding their own business. Italy brought their soldiers. You can look at that on YouTube now too. You can Google the Italian-Ethiopian War, and you'll see Mussolini trying to convince Italians that they have to go to Africa to civilize the pagans in Ethiopia. And I have another book here, which is written by the late Archbishop Abuna Yisahak. And this book has pictures of what was happening on the ground in Ethiopia. And inside of his book, he has pictures that shows that once the Italians were in Ethiopia, they were given the instructions to kill everybody with a cross. So there's some contradictory realities going on. And I must let you people know, as I said in the beginning, you have to know the history of Ethiopia. From approximately 322, 324 AD, Ethiopia was printing the cross on their coins. Emperor Izana, the Ethiopian emperor, was already having the Christian cross on their coinage. So this nation is more Christian and maybe more ancient than even Rome. So now this is really this might touch a little buttons, but this whole authenticity of who has the most authentic Christianity. That's not the topic of this discussion, but let your listeners, start looking, and fact check me, please. That's why I'm trying to give you names and dates so you can look for yourself. So all of these things are playing into what was setting the scene for that time. So, and the U.S. government was not successful at catching Black people then, kind of like even now. Many Black people did get away, and some of them helped to train the Ethiopian Air Forces.
Right. Ethiopia is the only country that I know that wasn't colonized.
Right. It was occupied.
It was occupied. Occupation
and colonization are two different things. So for those of you who read the Bible, Ethiopia is one of the first nations mentioned in the Bible. And from that time, and even before biblical recorded history, up until this time, for some reason, God has left that little place uncontrolled by any other forces. Even being in the Sea of Islam, it was not overthrown as the Islamic spread west took place. It was not overtaken. The Italians occupied the land for approximately 5 years. But for those who have never been to Ethiopia, I think it's important to understand the landscape and also the social, military, and communal borders. There are people who are in Ethiopia who never came to the capital, and they're Ethiopians. And what Benito Mussolini controlled were the major city parts. He did not get out into the countryside. I've been there. I've seen the place. The Italians were not occupying all of Ethiopia, as reported in the papers. They occupied the capital. Ethiopia has some loving people and some terrible warriors, and they were not overcome, those warriors.
Right.
Okay.
I want to ask you, as a Christian, and for many Christians, we know that when we ascribe the King of Kings and Lord of Lords and Light of the World, we know about Jesus. But the Ethiopian emperor is the other person that is known with those titles. How did, is it a cultural thing or a spiritual, a biblical thing that those titles were ascribed to the emperor?
Okay. Ethiopian history, Bible history, African history, all of those things are intertwined. And that's a little hard for us to believe because most of us have Bibles with some funny looking pictures in them that have nothing to do with history.
Yeah.
And sometimes what we see with our eyes, what we read with our eyes, and what we watch in history are totally contradictory. Okay. So not only in 322, 324, when I'm talking to you about Emperor Izana,
Yeah.
for those people who read the Bible, wasn't there a eunuch who worked for the Ethiopian government who was already reading Old Testament scrolls or writings? He wasn't reading the Bible because the Bible wasn't complete. So we have to get that out of our brains. If he was reading anything from Isaiah or Isaiah, he already had the scriptures, correct? The Ethiopian eunuch.
Oh
yeah. Well, you all talked about church, so I'm going to talk about Bible stuff because you opened it.
Yes, so please.
So he was already reading. He was already familiar with it, correct? Just think about that historically. He's in Jerusalem, he's writing, and he's already reading, and he knows, and he's reading, and he's understanding. But he got to this point where he's talking about who he was communicating about Christ. So the Ethiopian history, the Bible history, and Ethiopian history are combined. Ethiopia also has its own alphabet, its own language, so it don't need Western validation to be true. For some reason, in addition to being kept separate, they have recorded their own history. That's a little bit different than the narrative that we all have received. It's different than the pictures we look at. It's different than how history is told, whether we go to university in London or university in Nigeria, America, or anywhere else. Ethiopian people have their own history, their own reference. And many things that we have learned are contradictory.
Yes.
And just because it's contradictory don't mean it's not true. I think that we have to really, start putting the pieces together. There's another book that might be very hard to find. It's called Ethiopia, the Missing Link. If your people out there can research it, Ethiopia, the Missing Link, that would help add things. So with this historical thing, the Ethiopian history, pretty close to 1 Kings chapter 10 in the Bible, the King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba or Saba, who actually, she has different names. The people in Yemen call her Bilqis, but that whole area, Ethiopia, the southwest of the Arabian Peninsula, that was all under the Ethiopian government's territory in history before European borders. You hear me talk about this BC, before colonialism, before the Berlin Conference, before captivity. Well, Ethiopia's borders now are not the same as they were in the Old Testament. They're not the same as they were when the Bible is talked about. Ethiopia is talking about a larger landmass than what is geographical, United Nations, right? Yes. So we have to use like sense as we're reading the Bible, and I think that we have to use the Bible and history if we want to really, for those who are Christian and those who care to do it. So it is reported in Ethiopian history, which is also tied into their church history, that this Queen of Sheba also carried the seed line from King Solomon. And with that seed line, this same child is the one who got the instructions by the Creator to take the Ark of the Covenant out of Jerusalem and bring it to Ethiopia, which goes into this whole history and culture of why the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is the only church that has the replica of the Ark of the Covenant in every church. Right. Their Old Testament history and their New Testament history is all part of the church service. It's all integrated. There is no Old Testament life, New Testament life. It's all mixed together because it's a culture. I think we talked about this on your show before. It's bigger than religion. It's a culture.
Yeah.
So we're reading the book 2 or 3 times removed by an observer. So we're totally lost in the story now. We got all the characters mixed up. We got the histories mixed up. And based upon us being colonized, based upon us being captives in foreign countries, and we got other images and pictures in the book, we're confused as hell. Excuse the expression.
Yeah.
So that is why you okay. Did that answer your question? So that history, that King of Kings, that history has a long attachment. And if you look at other Ethiopian kings, they have those titles there. This whole history of the Solomonic dynasty in Ethiopia.
Right.
Okay, that's Ethiopia. There's a book called The Fedha Negas, which deals with the history of the glory of of the kings. It talks about the lineage of the kingdoms in Ethiopia and who they're historically written. Because Ethiopia has histories. Haile Selassie in another book called Real Facts About Ethiopia, written by J.A. Rogers, Joel Augustus Rogers. Haile Selassie brags that the Ethiopians can trace their lineage all the way back to sons of Adam, and they have it written. So I don't know who else has that, but Ethiopia has their own language. They have their own alphabet. And any history that any other person has, Ethiopia has recorded history going along at the same time. So,
right. Greetings, Rahina Bello, Theodora Igwe. Thank you. El Hadi Toto. Greetings. WSR1 TV. Welcome. Atem Deng Kulang. He says, salute Susan West and Ras Jomo Selassie. I. And then Morenike Bolu Joko. She wrote something that I want to take. She said, great information and knowledge. She wrote something that I can't even read. And I've studied the reign of Haile Selassie in Ethiopia. No, that's not the one. Oh, I thought I saw something else. WSR1 says Ethiopia and the undefeated, uncolonized African territory. Mm-hmm. Yes, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Ethiopia stretched across to West Africa before Western borders.
That's right.
Wow.
And it was also known, Ethiopia also had different names and attributes. So for those who follow things from the Islamic line, and if those of you who read the old, what they might call Oriental writings, the name that we use as Ethiopia now was also known as Abyssinia. So Muslim people might know that Abyssinia becomes important because Abyssinia is where the first converts to Al-Islam, that's where they left to be protected in the Hijra. They were instructed by the prophet to go to Abyssinia where the Ethiopian king would protect you. Why? Because the Ethiopian Judeo-Christian history was already in a line with what the prophet Muhammad was supposed to be telling the people in Saudi Arabia. So now we're getting into interreligious history. And once again, Ethiopia is there to tell the story. So that's why the real Muslims were not supposed to wage war on any Christians, because it's Christianity that saved Islam. That's if you know history. If you don't know history, they tell you anything.
True. Absolutely. I want to then, of course, at some point talking about the conversation today, the focus of our conversation today, we're still going to go into some religious or cultural things, because they're all intertwined somehow. I want you to throw light on the divinity of Emperor Haile Selassie. Why is it ascribed to him as a divine being? This is something that as Christians, we know to be ascribed only to Christ again. And I've heard somewhere that the Ethiopian king is the only king that even the Queen of England bows to. And I found that oh, wow, really, So go ahead and just talk about the divinity of the Emperor Haile Selassie, or the emperors of Ethiopia.
Well, I'm going to give it to you the best way that I can, and I'm going to communicate it to you with ways that I understand, and I'm going to throw some other variables into the equation. Let us look at something else, and I just want to just show you something here. Most nations, in some form or fashion, recognize the divine authority given to every leader, whether leader is good or bad. So if we think about that, every leader has been put in position by divine order, whether we like it or not. Here's where things start to get a little interesting. Every leader might not claim descent from King David and King Solomon, as what is done in Ethiopia. As a matter of fact, the newspaper articles that I'm trying to encourage everybody to read, I don't want to spoil a surprise, but the newspaper articles.
Spoil it.
Well, I'll give you pieces of it. The newspapers that you read are going to tell you that Emperor Haile Selassie has descent from the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. And for those who know Bible history, you know that Solomon's father is who? King David. King David is from the tribe of Judah. So what if the Creator made, just say for instance, what if the Creator made some promises to King David about his children ruling forever? And if we know, and people see the power, and Christians recognize the power of the Most High on Christ and give him the divine attributes, and we also attribute that the personage, Yeshua, Jesus, whatever name you know him by, didn't have any physical children. Well, that doesn't mean that the Davidic bloodline doesn't stop, does it? Jesus Christ or Jesus Christus has cousins. He got to have other people in the family, because it's not just his father who comes from the line of David.
Right.
It's a family cultural history. And some people say, yeah, God has no color and this and that, and Jesus Christ is on earth and Jesus Christ has no color. Wait a minute. Now you're mixing up too many things. You're going too far. Any person incarnate with a navel, even albino, they have some sort of color, some sort of features. Okay, so don't mix the people up in the name of religion. We're talking about bloodline people. I think I mentioned before in the show that the same traditions, histories, and practices, whether they're Muslim or Christian or dealing with some other spiritual systems, in West Africa, they're doing and they're carrying the same rules and regulations as the children of Israel in the Old Testament. It's all throughout Nigeria, right? It's all throughout South Africa. It's prophesied in the Bible that these same people are going to get spread to the four corners of the earth. Abraham's children had some 400-year, punishment put on them for, time out for you guys. 400 years. You go sit down and be ruled by your enemies. Read Deuteronomy 28. Well, who do you think the people are? I mean, I'm here in the West. I wasn't, we were stolen from Africa. We were stolen primarily in this side, from West Africa. The major countries in West Africa, the Nigeria, the Benin, Togo, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Mauritania, Mali, Cameroon, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Mali. Those empires where those people were stolen, that's the same ethnic groups. That's who inhabits primarily North America, Central America, the Caribbean islands. And as you get into Angola, you get more into South Central, not South Central LA, but South Central Africa. Those people were taken to South America. All of those Africans in Brazil, all those Africans in South America, Central America, you see? But it's a family of people who have been migrating, who have been moving. We have to look at history as we talk about anything, and that is what our problem is. Even in religion, we're accepting religion without knowing history. So we don't see ourselves in the image of God. That's from our last discussion too.
Interesting thing is, when you talked about the 400 years and the children of God being dispersed all around the world, it makes me want to wonder, as it would some of the viewers, who are these people, these children of God that is referred to in the Bible? Because if we look at a timeline, it looks like freedom at last is around the corner for Black people. And it looks to me, from what you've said, that Africans are the people referred to in the Bible. Is that too much? Well,
put it this way. I don't want to spoil a surprise again, because I hate you're turning me into a spoiler now. People are not going to want to.
Please be a spoiler.
Listen,
not a lot of people here will have an opportunity to go sort out the book.
And it's just for people who care to look at the Bible. If you don't want to look at the Bible, you can, we can talk about some other stories. But you started it, so I'm just going to finish it. Deuteronomy 28 just take a look at what was supposed to happen to disobedient children of God and read what we call the curses. Everybody like to preach about the blessings, right? That's verses 1 through 15 in Deuteronomy 28. Okay, read the verses like 16 to like 60 plus, even when it talks about going into ships. And the word Egypt is mentioned, and is not meaning Egypt, ancient Northeast Africa, or Kemet. The word Egypt is symbolic of a house of bondage. Because if you're a black person in the 21st century and you live in Jamaica, that's like an Egypt, because it's a house of bondage. If you're in Puerto Rico, if you're in Haiti, if you're in Colombia, if you're in Bolivia, if you're in Costa Rica, Venezuela, if you're in if you're in England, you know what I mean, and you don't have a genetic history of being there, you were probably taken there as captive, or you were taken captive from somewhere else and brought there, right? So just read the history. And here's another thing that's going to cause problems. Read African history of African people. All of us who have degrees and scholarships, who's authenticating this stuff? Whose version of history are we reading? Why is it just now in the 21st century that people are publicly saying, okay, Columbus didn't discover Americas? If it was a lie now, it was a lie then too.
Yeah.
Who keeps feeding us these false narratives? And why do we drink it without filtering it? So if you look at, I'm not going to spoil this one. You're not going to get me to spoil it. Read Deuteronomy. Spend the next month or so. Most people are in shelter in place still. You're not going to school full time. You're at home with your family. This might be a nice thing to do. Read Deuteronomy 28, 16 plus. And I don't care which country, especially as black people, any country you're in, read the history of Deuteronomy and read the history of black people in your nation. And you answer the question for yourself. Which might be, and now I want to get into something. I'm gonna touch it. Which now gets into, just like Moses baptized people with a thought and a mindset for liberation, that is how Rastafari see Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who was born in Jamaica, August 17th, 1887. This is why he becomes so important. He reminds us of like a John the Baptist composite Moses, who's telling black people about some prophetical things that don't make any sense except to people who have a spiritual and a cultural reality that believe that one day these white colonial structures will have to fall down. Remember, Marcus Garvey was preaching when pretty much all of Africa outside of Liberia and Ethiopia were all colonized by some European nation. All people in the Caribbean were still under the control, even Jamaica, of the Queen of England. So whether you're British in Nigeria or you're British in Jamaica or the other Caribbean islands, you still got the vestiges of that crown controlling you. You're still wards of the state. Right? And your government, your structures. Okay, how do your judges and your lawyers dress on a hot sunny day when they have to go to court? What do they put on? Do they wear like African clothes? And
please don't go there. Especially in Nigeria.
I didn't say any names. I just said, how do your judges? You said that. I did not say that. How do they put on African attire? Do they wear African hairstyles? Do they put on, dreadlocks? And do they put on African braids?
In fact, just to digress a little bit, this is what we're talking about, the abuse. It will take a while, but we're going to take it a step at a time. Can you imagine back home in Nigeria, if you had to keep hair like this in secondary school, the teachers, the elders would say, we'll call it a bushy hair. Bushy hair, go and get it cut. These are the mindsets. They, of course, they are also victims of what they have been told and how they've learned who they are or how they see themselves or perceive themselves. And so here in the West, you have the children of primary school age, secondary school age allowed to keep their hair. But back home in Africa, we are still at the point where they see African hair as unkept and bushy and make references to it like that. They still haven't gotten to the point where they see beauty in the hair, natural hair that the Creator has given to us as Africans. That's just to digress a little bit.
No, it's not digressing. So listen, lightning and thunder on anybody who was teaching that in the 21st century and who taught it, period, because many of those same people will claim that they're following Christ, and the prophecy and the description of Christ with his hair white like lamb's wool and those things and those analogies. So people in the name of God are contradicting even what the Bible is telling them. So how can we trust these people? How can we? Are we saying that God made a mistake? And under Haile Selassie, something else I must mention. Emperor Haile Selassie, I must mention. It's the first time in history that the Ethiopian sovereign king had his wife crowned on the same day right next to him. So that broke tradition, showing the equality of woman, elevating the status of woman. As that is also being stated, as we look now in this 21st century, the African woman who has been the most rejected in history, culture, status, economics, respect, regardless of what people think, she is about to be made the top. And what has to happen is it's going to be so important based upon what you've said. This colonization has had an effect on our psychology, our self-worth, our value of each other. It has caused women up till today a problem with honestly looking in the mirror and being satisfied with self, which goes back again to this whole idea that when we see ourselves, we have been taught not to see the image of God. And that's contradictory to the Bible for all the people who are Christians. So we have all these oxymorons going on in our brains that's even contradictory to what we're doing on Sunday. And it's like in the name of some God, we're fighting ourselves subconsciously, because we're not really paying attention to what we're saying and we're doing until we sit back and look and like, wait a minute. This is fighting me, is disrespecting myself, my ancestors, my children, and we're trying to create a paradigm that's contradictory to nature, and the Most High God created nature. So going back to the divine attributes of His Majesty, Marcus Mosiah Garvey prophesied about a king and told that Black deliverance is coming near. Inside of the Bible, in many instances, and maybe we'll talk about this another day, there are many prophecies that talk about the king. It talks about the people who were scattered to the four corners of the earth, wherever you believe they are, that there's going to come a time where there's going to be a flag, there's going to be an ensign raised, and everywhere where these children have been scattered, in the name of that power, they're going to be called to come back home. Now, that's what the Bible teaches. I don't know what's happening in your churches. I don't know what's happening in your religious areas, but the Bible teaches that. So now the key is, who has been scattered in slavery to the four corners of the earth?
Who has?
100
years.
Who has? Who has been? And Deuteronomy 28 also speaks of people who are in the homeland who will be overrun by the foreigner that comes from the other end of the earth, whose language and culture you know not. So for those who are in Africa, it's the same story. Who controls the bank? Who controls the value of the dollar? Who controls your government? Who controls how you dress when you go to the courtroom? Who controls your standard of education, your degrees of secondary and post-secondary knowledge? Who authenticates that for you? Does it come from the University of Timbuktu, the University of Gal, the Hagia Sophia out of ancient Egypt, or is somebody else now writing the standards when we taught the world? You see what I'm saying now? And one reference point alone, we're going to have to be a little bit more smarter, because if we want to save the next generation, God has given them a spirit where they're not going to be ruled by people anymore who don't make sense. The young generation is not having it.
No, they're not having it.
Okay.
Wow.
So I believe for the sake of saving the earth and saving our people, and even saving other people and other races and nationalities, African people must come back to their highest state of divine being. And we must see a new royal format. So in the image of Emperor Haile Selassie I and his African queen, we must readjust our family structure. We must readjust the way that we see ourselves and each other. We must address ourselves in high format, like, yes, king, yes, queen, yes, my princess, yes, young king. Our thought, our divine speech has to change for each other, and we don't need anyone else to authenticate us. No one has to validate our spiritual concepts, and that's why people don't like Rastas.
Yeah,
because we don't need other people's validation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Could be a problem.
I love Rasta people.
No, thank you. Rasta people
I'm not
love
Rasta,
you.
but I love Rasta people.
Rasta people love you too.
And Theodore Igwe says, but even the word name Abyssinia has a Latin origin,
Right?
and has had it is as hard as it is to find Abyssinia. It is actually a Latin word.
Yeah. Right. I'm not authenticating originality. I'm telling you reference point that other people have written about it. So some people, when you see the word Ethiopia, you see another word says Abyssinia. I need us to realize that those reference points are talking about the same place. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. And Keto Hill says, wow, history is powerful. And Annette Dorr says, great interview, Susan. Thank you, Annette. And WSR1 says, slave merchants doctored up history to subdue and get their slaves confused, and thereby lost their roots to false narratives and cooked up histories.
That's
and
right.
Chippy Labs says, this is very interesting. That because of what WSR1 said, I'm going to go back to Ethiopia, the melting pot for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And
even before those religions too, okay? Okay. Even before those concepts too. All right.
Right. We are at crossroads as Africans. We are awoken, but there is a conflict. I keep repeating this because this is where I don't want people to think that because they want to celebrate their Africanness that they feel like they have to do away with certain things, or that they have misconstrued the faith, Christianity faith, as a white man's religion. So I want you to also touch on how Christianity, the real Christianity, not the doctored book that we have as a Bible that we use presently, how Christianity is not alien to Africans, how Christianity might as well be an African way of living or belief system or religion. I don't want to call it religion because it's a little tricky when you call it religion.
And what happened is what we're doing now is we're trying to create a narrative as our conscious is being elevated. Even the whole idea about not using the word religion and graduating from the word, it by no means that we're leaving the creator and we're leaving lessons of how to understand the creator, because different people understand the creator in different ways. What I think is important is I think that it's important that whatever we say we believe in, I think that we need to study it. We need to study the origins of it. If they're talking about real people, then we should try to study those people. And I believe that we should try to find out what happened to us in our story along the way. Only thing that I'm communicating to people is I'm still studying. The more I study, the story is adding up more and more that we're reading the book under the wrong guise of who's who. It's like you're reading a book and you love the family, you love the stories. And because you don't know your own history, you don't know that they're talking about your ancestors. For instance, if we look at, this has nothing to, well, it does have something to do with it, but let us just take a look at in the Bible how you have the priesthood, okay, the Levites, and there are some Levites who they're just musicians, and by them being Levites, the father Levite pass it down to the next generation. Usually the males do the same thing, and then that male pass it down to the next male, and then that. So historically, the same things. They're the singers, they're the string instruments, they're this, they're that. Okay, so you go to Africa, you go to places like Mali. You look at the cultures of of those who are, you know, the Djibati, the Sissoko family, Djibouti, depending upon what part of West Africa you go to. And you see these people are all like, let's say, Kora players, you know. So those core players, anybody can learn it, but it's traditionally done by those families. That's what they've been doing for a long time. Not 10 years, not 20 years. We're talking like hundreds of years. It's just what they do. Whether they're Muslim, whether they're Christian, because there's enough religions, you could change religions every day and you still won't exhaust, you know what I mean, the year. There's just a lot of religions out there. But your genetic makeup is what it is. Right? So that's the same story as you're reading all of these Psalms, you're reading Proverbs. These things are being passed down from family to family to family to family. Even if you look at the subtitle of the Psalms in the Bible, they're sending them, okay, this goes to the sons of Korah. This goes to the they're telling their descendants, this is how I need you to play the instruments. I want you to do it this way. That's our history. If one, you happen to read the Bible, and two, if you begin to start learning African history. I'm not trying to convert anybody to do anything, but I am leaving a way for us to begin to control the narrative from our own perspective. Whatever you believe in, make sure that you're firm in it. Let be convinced in your own conscience, like the New Testament says. Be convinced in your conscience so that you're standing firm on it. But as you begin to look deeper, you might get a whole lot more engrossed in it, because you're going to see it's the history and culture of our surviving ways. Moses was learned in all of the ways of the Egyptians, according to the book. Well, that's another set of Africans who had already mapped out astrology, mapped out time, which are also from the Cushite family, and which also comes out of Ethiopia. So this story it's just our story, no matter which way you look at it. Like me personally, I'm not really arguing about who's who. It's all us. So my argument is not about, so religion and those things. Haile Selassie himself, His Majesty himself, said, since God has allowed other religions to exist, man has no dominion trying to dictate to another person how they need to view the Creator. I would never try to do that, and I wouldn't even try to remove you away from it. But what is
what is
okay.
WSR1 says, God is in us, but they will be preaching wealth and looking for God while God is with us.
That's right.
He goes on to say we must take back our king and queen status. And then
the Bible teaches the same things. It said that he wants you to be a nation of prophets, priests, and kings. You pick the three.
Prophets, priests, and kings. Yeah. Absolutely. That's what the Bible says.
Okay. So the more we engage with each other, there's really not a big contradiction. That's another divisive tool of the devil that makes us stop holding reasonings amongst ourselves. So our Muslim friend, I've been in Ethiopia, and at 5:30 you hear the call to prayer for the Islamic family, and a half hour later you hear the church bells ringing in the same town. And then you also know that Beta Israel, the Israelite Ethiopians, are in another area firmly planted. So we're not arguing about religion. That's not Black people's thing.
No,
that's not our thing at all. Yeah.
And our wet thorn says Rasta don't need validation from anyone. Ooh. And Theodore Igwe says, exactly, we need to get rid of the concept of religion, as even Jesus was against the concept of organized religion. And Kito Hill is trying to tell us the meaning of her name. He says Kito is a female African name meaning a rare and precious jewel. My mother always called me a princess jewel. Word speaks power. Absolutely. And the WSR1 says Egyptians were originally blacks before Arab slave traders run blacks and took over North Africa.
Yeah, can we touch that area too? Because even in the Bible, I think that between the Bible and the movies that we've watched and those funny pictures in the Bible, it got Black people just thoroughly confused. Okay. As we're watching the pictures and we're thinking about history according to the narrative that was given to us, many people are under the false narrative that Hebrews or Jews built the pyramids out of brick, and Pharaoh was hard on them and told them to take away the straw, right? But the pyramids are not made out of brick. They're made out of stones that are 1 and 2 tons, and they're pretty much almost like laser fashioned for some perfect geometrical like type build. So it's not even communicating just to throw away the Bible, but that narrative does not fit history. That's not what happened. That's not there. It's not there. If we chronologically look at the personage of Moses, chronologically the empires were already there are dynasties of Kemetic history that's written. Ethiopian history is written. There's times when the pharaoh or whatever name you want to use, when they united the North and the South Kingdom, that's the Ethiopian kingdom and the Northern Kingdom, which is up south, because the river Nile flows from south to north, not north to south. So down the river stream, all the way, where the river lets out, that's north. The source is going deeper into the interior of Africa. So the civilizations just didn't start in Kemet or Egypt. The civilizations came deep from with Africa and traveled down.
Absolutely.
So there's history where the Ethiopian kings and the Egyptian king are the same person. They're uniting the empires. So when you're looking at modern Egyptians today who are in power, you're looking at times of Alexander the Greek. The Kemetic Empire was ancient and old, and ancient and old. Even then, we have to understand the concept of history and how long we've been here. Written, not theory. How much written history. And we have to know other people's history too. The Arabization of North Africa has not always been that way. You have to understand the history of what happened after Islam began to take hold, and how they spread and what they did. That's just history. That you have to know those things.
WSR1 says there is a dwarf pyramid in Enugu state of Nigeria, which existed before the famous pyramids. So
they're all over. There are more pyramids in Sudan than there are in Egypt. There are pyramids all over.
Right.
There are similar structures built here in America. Okay.
So that is confirming what you just
that's
said.
What I'm saying. I don't want to go too far, but I think that you have some very educated people listening today, and as we begin to reason, that's why we don't have no time to argue.
Yeah.
If we begin to reason, all of us have bits and pieces, and as we're researching, His Majesty said that anywhere Africans are, we need to spend more time learning and understand each other, because for too long we have been kept separate. And we have been taught different things and have come up with different traditions, different customs. Now is the time for us to come together and begin to tell our stories to each other. If other people don't listen, it's okay. We need to control the narrative for ourselves. I'm not going to back off of that for 2021. We have to control the narrative.
Absolutely. Diet Africa, welcome. She says, interesting guest. And WSR1 is telling us precisely where the pyramid is in Enugu State. He says, the local government area of Enugu State. That should be one of the World Heritage sites. They should. And Obiman says archaeologists have found the burial sites of the pyramid builders. They were well fed and black.
Yeah,
they were black.
And well, here's another key it's not directly related to this, but that is how come the Senegalese scholar Sheikh Anta Diop, some people say the word Diop, but it's Diop. You have to realize how much research and how important it was for him to even do carbon-14 dating to date the ancient bodies in ancient Egypt that prove that they were black people. The hairstyles and the lifestyles of many of the Senegalese, especially the Wolof, are the parallel lifestyles of the ancient Egyptians.
Right.
See, we really have to take full time and just study ourselves right now. We need to just put a pause on everything that comes from the West, and we need to just spend full time researching our African history. People in West Africa need to know what happened in South Africa. People in America need to know what happened to black people in the Caribbean. Black people in the Caribbean need to know what happened in East Africa. We have not had the chance to just focus on ourselves and each other. That is what is needed right now.
Absolutely. This is music to my ears because I can't have enough of this. We can't do it in one day. We'll take as much as we can today. Now, My final point of my final focal point in today's discussion would be Ethiopia again.
Mhm.
You know, when I was little, I'll give you a short story. When I was a toddler, you know, just thereabout. I was traveling with my mother on an airplane from you know, domestic flight. And then my mom, when I said to her that particular story, she was shocked that I remembered because I was so young. But I was playing and standing on my mother's body, and I turned around, and there was a white man sitting just behind us, and his eyes were probably blue or hazel color. And then I turned around and I screamed, and my mom said, I said to her that God was sitting behind God. Do you know why that happened? Because I had formed an image in my mind of what God looked like by the stories I was told. Anybody who was white, anybody who looked like the sun was God. And this person looked like the picture that had been created in my mind of what God should look like.
Mhm.
And now,
But it was also coerced. You didn't just create that out of no. It was coerced.
yes,
It was coerced from
mhm,
childhood. Okay.
yes. So now we're at this point. Thank goodness for this uh, deliverance, I will call it, emancipation for me, and I do hope for many others. When you look at Emperor Haile Selassie, today I was looking at his photograph and I'm thinking, this is what Jesus must have looked like. Yes. At least that beat even in this doctored Bible that we read now.
You're
They
too
still,
smart. You're getting too smart.
I, you know, what can I do? What can I say? You know, even in this doctored current Bibles that we read, they couldn't take that away when they described the color of his skin.
Burnt.
So, how then, especially for those of us in Catholic churches who carry images and all these things, we only see, because that's where that picture came from. Even though I was not a Catholic, we were living in times where we were seeing images of these things. And so these images were created in our minds of a white Jesus, of everything that has to do with God, that is, it was white. Once upon a time, I will say a prayer and say, oh, wash me as clean as white as snow. I didn't even know what snow looked like, but that was the prayer that I was, I was taught by other people praying. So I kept, so of course, in our minds, we had made everything that looked like us look like the devil, and everything that looked like Caucasian looked like God.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get to the place where we begin to see ourselves, especially when we read the scriptures, to understanding that the people being referenced in the scripture are people like us?
I think the most important things, if you read the scriptures, believe that you are created in the image of God. For those who read the scriptures, for those who don't read the scriptures, we have to take pride and realize that we are enough. You know, there are many musicians who are making songs. India I read, the Rastas are always talking about it. Rastas, people just consistently just praise the way that we were created. You see? So we need to be re-educated on how do we view ourselves, which is healing. That's part of reparations too, you know. We're going to have to repair ourselves. It's our responsibilities. Other people have a fiduciary as well. It's gonna go deep, you know. But reparations have to take place because we have to be repaired from what has happened to us. Now, that's a whole nother discussion that the Bible prophesies about that too. We'll talk about that later. But going back to this aspect of Rasta culture and this whole aspect of seeing ourselves, there's another thing that takes place. And I told you that you can't remove talking about the emperor and not looking at the ancient churches. You also have to look at the ancient artwork in churches that predate the European churches. You have to look at the early artwork of even the Polish churches. Even before we get into this church thing, do you know where the Greek gods love to live? You talk about an airplane. Do you know where the Greek gods love to live? In Ethiopia. You know why? Because Ethiopia is the third highest. Addis Ababa is the third highest capital city in the world. I think it's third or fourth, where you have to fly miles into the air to get there. Ethiopia, Addis Ababa is over a mile above sea level. So in order to get there, you have to go up. You're up in the clouds in the city. All right. So if you even look at Greek mythology, look at who they say the god or the divine people are. Okay. Why? And here's another thing. I mean, and not really to spend too much time talking about others, but why can other people have like deified images of their people and black people can't? Why is it such a crime for black people to see themselves in the image of God? Everyone else's mythology that you're forced to learn in school, do we call Greek philosophy and Greek mythology paganism, or is it looked upon piously? Why do we have such a problem, and why do we participate in decimating our own ancestors and subconsciously cursing our own selves with a premeditated thought, being coerced into hating yourself? Because that's what it's doing.
Absolutely, yes.
You're not seeing yourself in the image of the Creator. That's a problem. That is a problem. And I'm not denying anybody else they can't see the image of Christ or of the Creator in their image. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about us. We have a right to see the Creator in our own image. And that is what Prophet Marcus Mosiah Garvey told us. That if God created black people, then God in some sense must be black. He knew exactly what he was doing. He made black people. Exactly what he was doing. So you can't be a Christian and then hate black people too. That's going to be something that we're going to have to come to a reckoning with. For those who believe it. Now, everybody don't want it. Everybody who say Lord is not with God either. But if you're going to read the book and believe it, now you got to adhere to it. Now you have to adhere to it. You're responsible for what you believe. That's what I said in the beginning. Whatever you say you believe, you're going to have to do it. There's a problem in Islam because Bilal, the Ethiopian, is the one who called everyone to prayer. Super dark, not a little dark, super dark. So much so that the early converts were upset. That why you got this jet black man doing the call of prayer? Like he's not from like our family. Why? Look at Moses with another darker skinned sister who he married, who everybody was jeering about, the dark skinned, heavily melanated Ethiopia. Now, not saying that Moses and them didn't have melanin either, because they passed for Egyptians as well. So this whole thing about skin texture is some old psychological things that we got going on too.
Wow. We're going to continue this discussion another time.
What happened to my guest? I thought I got all these books ready.
I know. Unfortunately, the other guy in Ethiopia just realized that he'll be breaking his fast just as we are coming on live. And the other guy from Nigeria just couldn't join us for some reason. He's been trying to get on, but we haven't wasted any time.
No. Well, everyone has homework, so maybe you all can help out as you're having these healthy reasonings. We don't want to have discussions or confrontations, especially when it comes to how people were raised to see the Creator. Let us be mindful and respectful of that, because under Emperor Haile Selassie, the Muslims, the Christians, the Israelite, the so-called atheists, the paganists, everybody was still governed by one king. And His Majesty made sure that he tried to protect everybody in that realm. And these are some things that people don't understand as they also begin to spew a lot of narratives. They don't really know the history, the politics, even Ethiopia and Eritrea, not really, and that boils down to even modern time. Knowing the history of what the colonialists have played in those histories and those realities. This whole idea of Eritrea being a separate, country with demarcated borders. Where did the borders come from? What year were the borders established? Who drew them in sand? Who separated people who have the same alphabet, same hair, same head, same skin? Who separated them? What caused such a great schism? We have to know the history of those people who came in colonizing, those desires of rebuilding a Roman Empire. What did they do to Africans to pit us against each other? You see, we're going to have to spend time controlling the narrative of history, and we need to start looking at more sources than what our diplomas have so-called given us the permission to hold ourselves as educated. How can you be educated? We don't know our own lineage. We don't know our own cousins, and we're proclaiming that we're educated. We know everything about King George and all of their family, their cousins, their dogs, their pets, where their summer house was. And we don't know about our own aunts and uncles and our neighboring ethnic groups who control lands.
Right. Oh, wow. Rastafarian, go ahead with knowledge dropping, bro. Respects. WSR1 says from YouTube. And X Daze or Dazai. Blasphemy is when you see or portray yourself less than what your most high is.
Right. So we're fighting God when we don't see ourselves in the image of God. That's what I was lightly getting at. He said it, overtly. I was trying to communicate that we're not following God's wishes if we don't see ourselves in the image of God.
Absolutely. He says that he's made us in his likeness.
Right. Fearfully and wonderfully made.
We still fail to allow that to sink in, that he's made us in his likeness. What we see is that he's made he's made people in white skin. When we read that scripture, that's what is in a black man's mind most of the time. We haven't seen us as black people made in the image of God.
So therefore, so here there lies the question. That is where the problem between religion and following the Bible comes in again. That's not what the Bible states. That's what religion is imposing upon us. The scriptures are totally against what people in church are saying. That's where the problem is. That's where the problem is. That goes back to our previous reasoning. We're doing things that we're taught, just like Christ said, you're doing the customs of man. You're not doing what was written. So it's the same story now. We're talking about things that people taught us in their churches. They don't have nothing to do with even the Bible scriptures that we argue over sometimes. What people are doing in churches have nothing to do with the Bible most of the time.
That's right. Kito Hill says accountability when you know and read the Bible. Accountability when you know and read the Bible. But then the other part is, how do we know that we're reading? Because there's been so many translations of the Bible. The King James version, so many.
Living Testament. Okay, listen to this. And here we go. It's just like watching the news. You turn to one station, they tell you the weather's going to be this tomorrow. You turn to another station, they tell you the weather's going to be this. Do you stop watching news every day? No. You watch it 3 or 4 times a day. You even watch 3 or 4 news stations. Why? Because you're trying to really ascertain what's happening. So if we seek, we're going to find, and we're also going to. Things are going to be revealed to us. Maybe this is one of the reasons why all of this confusion is here, so that we don't get back to reading it and understanding it for ourselves. So it's like a ghost or a boogeyman then got in front of the Bible trying to scare us away from it. Because according to the Bible, the king is going to come. He's going to raise his flag. The people are going to get ready to be redeemed. And the last shall be made first and the first shall be made last. So maybe the people in the power don't want you to know that. That's what the Bible teaches on earth. In that day, all of these things are going to start happening. Now, most people who are oppressed and don't have no faith and no hope, they're thoroughly depressed. And without faith, you can't please God. Because people have run out. That's what the Bible says. People have run out. And the only reason you run out is if you never poured it in. So that's why we don't argue about people understanding God or the Creator. Because if they're building their faith, they're trying to find the Creator is going to leave a path for them to get there if they're honestly looking.
Yes, because we're spirit beings,
right? And none of us have figured it out. Do you know how many heated discussions I have with my own Rastas and other Christians and Muslims? And we're learning, we're sharpening each other because we're really trying. And that's what I'm encouraging everybody to do. Take this time to spend time talking about our history. Take this time and spend time learning about other families, what happened in Jamaica, what happened in St. Vincent, what happened in Guadeloupe, what happened in Nigeria, what happened in Ghana, what happened in Burkina Faso. We need to talk about what happened to us.
There we're going to find the healing that we were looking for.
Reparation. We need to repair. Yes. And
try to understand what happened to us.
and be thankful to our Creator now that we have been the ones shown this time, that we're here alive in this time to make the conscious decision to be transformed.
Absolutely.
Because as soon as the knowledge kicks in, it transforms you. You're like born again African. You know what I mean?
Oh, Ras Jomo. Once again, I just want to say a very big thank you. Thank you. Thank you. No time wasted. Absolutely none. We're going to keep doing this, different aspects of it. And so finally, for those people who will argue about the divinity and the kingship and the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie, or probably want to say some degrading things about his running away from the war front as cowardice. Just summarize for these people. Just summarize before you.
I want to do this. Outside of the women, how many people on earth saw who Christ really was? Outside the women, because women are a little smarter. Outside the women, how many people saw who Christ really was on earth, according to the scriptures? All right. How many hundreds of years did it take afterward for people to say, hey, listen, maybe that guy was the one who the scriptures were talking about? Like 300 something years, right? Inside of the Bibles that most people have, for those who read the Bible, is it true that God made Moses as God on earth? Is it true? I mean, these are just questions. You can find out yourself. I'm not going to spoil the surprise. All right. When Christ was being questioned, did he say, is it not written that ye also are gods? Did Christ affirm that Psalms 82 communication? So I don't deny that the power of the Holy Spirit can rest on man, and they have the power of God. Other than that, we blaspheme in the spirit, I think. If God ordains you, who can stand against you? Don't you have the power of the Almighty God? So therefore, in that triune energy, if the Spirit of God, the same Spirit of God, what happened when Christ got baptized? What does the scripture say?
That the Spirit came upon him.
So what happens in the day of Pentecost when the Holy Spirit is released upon man and the power of God is upon you? Now what? Are you going to split hairs upon? Is that the power of God, or are you understand what I'm saying? I just questions, just some questions that I have, and just let each man be convinced in his own conscience. But if King David's family and God's prophecies to King David's were written, and this person happened to be one of King David's descendants, the person who was crucified got a crown of what? What kind of? Yes. And the Bible speaks about a king having a crown of what? Gold. Read Psalms 21. Read the other Psalms. Yeah. So we have someone from David's family, at least, that makes us think about the Bible, the person wearing the triple crown with the power of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit on his head, and the churches bow. And the World Council of Churches elected him defender of the faith in the 1950 for all Christianity. So these are things that, that just happen to happen. And look at us. You're sitting here in the 21st century, and the person that everybody hated, which was the Rasta, is now the topic of discussion all over the world. And the story has not changed. Not looking for nobody to validate it. Not fighting no wars to convert anybody into anything.
Yeah. Thank you.
Love and honor. Love and honor. Thank you.
I'll let you go, and I'll catch up with you on the other side.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience, and fact check. Bring me back information, because I want to keep learning too.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Right. All right, I'll catch up with you on the other side. Merci beaucoup. Well, thank you so very much, everyone who's joined our broadcast today. We've learned, of course, a thing or two. It doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take a little while. It took hundreds and thousands of years to get us to this point. So it's not going to happen overnight, but little by little, we will be breaking away those chains that keep us bound in our minds, And so with love, we're doing this with so much love. And so everyone who joined us today, thank you. If you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed to our channels, please do so. If you're watching from YouTube, please press the subscribe button. And when you do, press the bell button so that you are alerted when we do go live. If you're watching from Facebook, from my page, thank you. If you haven't followed or liked us on our page, please do so. It is SWOB21, SWOB21 on Facebook. And if you're watching from my personal wall, where we stream to as well, please migrate to my wall. Thank you so very much. And if you like what I'm wearing, this is made by our African Nigerian sister here in London. She has a YouTube channel called Mary's Lifestyle TV. Mary's Lifestyle TV. Please go and go and subscribe to her channel. I bought this outfit at a discount from her shop. So for those of you in London, go and try to find out how you can, get a good discount, especially now that the shops are opening up. All right. Thank you so much. I love you so much. And I learned so much today. God bless you. And I'll see you next weekend. God willing. Bye-bye. And God bless you.